Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Attorney General Lynch, both for your testimony this morning as well as your leadership at the Department of Justice on a daily basis. I want to pick up on Senator Capito's questions about the Asset Forfeiture Fund, because I've heard from everyone in New Hampshire, from our Attorney General to the Chiefs of Police Association to the average cop on the beat, about the concerns that they have with what has happened. And I think there are several ramifications for us in New Hampshire. One is because we are dealing with a crisis in opioid and heroin addiction, any loss of support makes it even more difficult for law enforcement to address that challenge. They have also expressed concern about the communications and how sudden it was to learn that they were not going to be able to have the equitable sharing payments that they were expecting. And they've also expressed concern about the formula for those payments, and concern that they're hearing that that formula could change from 80-20 to 50-50. So can you comment on, you talked a little bit about your efforts to communicate on this issue, but can you talk about what more we can do so that local officials aren't surprised by this kind of a dramatic shift?
Yes, thank you, Senator. And certainly it highlights the issues that arose at the end of the year as we were absorbing this rescission. And in terms of my discussions with my local law enforcement counterparts, both the heads of the police organizations and the sheriff's organizations, I have conveyed my direct apology to them, because we typically are able to build in communications with them over the course of policy changes like this, and that did not happen at this occasion. And so it has caused an even greater hardship on our colleagues, because they didn't know that it was happening.
Right.
And that certainly is not our intent and not our goal. So we've all been working on trying to resolve this issue in a way that restores the payments. Our goal would be to restore the payments to the full formula that we have been using.
So the 80-20. There is not an intent to change.
At this point, what we're trying to do, what we are doing is we are on a monthly basis keeping our state and local colleagues apprised of the progress of the Asset Forfeiture Fund, and we're doing this through communicating with the various law enforcement groups, major city chiefs, sheriffs, et cetera, as well as the DA's Association. And so we also are awaiting the results on our review of some settlements coming into the Asset Forfeiture Fund, because we have to determine how we will essentially manage the victim payments that are required out of those first. And certainly I know every law enforcement officer knows that the victims are why we do this, and of course they take priority here. But even with that, our goal is to try and restore it to the same program as before. We have certainly heard the same concerns, and certainly anticipate hearing more, and want those concerns. We want the communication with the law enforcement, with our DAs, with our state attorneys general on this, and we are keeping them apprised on a monthly basis of the status.
Well, and I know you're reluctant to be pinned down to a date when you expect those payments to begin again, but are you looking at something that's going to happen within the next couple of months, within the next 6 months, within the next year? Because all of that has an impact, as you know,
Yes.
at the local level.
It does, and certainly as Senator Capito has raised, it has an impact on their operations, but also these are operations that they're doing in conjunction with
Right.
the federal government. So they're actively helping us, and so we certainly do feel the obligation there on that level, and for that reason as well. There has been discussion, and certainly I've gotten questions about whether or not the influx of asset forfeiture funds from some of our large settlements, which the settlements have been adjudicated, the money is coming in now, can in fact restore these payments sooner rather than later. We are still, as I mentioned, working on dealing with the victim issue in those large settlements. And so once we have that formula resolved, we would have a better idea of funds that would be left from the large settlements, as well as an idea of how the fund is being replenished on a monthly basis. But certainly, we've told individuals, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to say individual, we've told our organizational colleagues that we will update them again in mid-March. At this point, I don't have a date on when the payments would start, but it's not our goal to delay them any longer than necessary. And it certainly has never been our goal to stop them totally.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I think the more information that can be provided at the local level, the more helpful it will be as they're trying to deal with how to compensate for the lack of those payments. Mr. Chairman, I know that my time has expired, but I'm hoping I can ask one more question. Senator Mikulski, in her opening statement, referred to the scourge of heroin and opioid abuse. And one of the things that we've seen in New Hampshire in response to that, and in our state, we're losing a person a day to overdose deaths, 3 times as many as we lost in traffic accidents last year. So one of the things that's beginning to work in communities is that law enforcement is working with treatment professionals, with the medical community, with the schools, to have a real comprehensive, cooperative approach to how to deal with this issue. I have been disappointed that at the federal level, we don't have the same sense of urgency and cooperative approach to deal with this issue, where we're working across agencies, and there's a real understanding that in 2014, we lost 47,000 people in this country to overdoses. So can you reassure me that there is a sense of urgency and that this is something that across agencies, there's an understanding that we've got to do better to address?
Well, Senator, I can not only reassure you to that, I can tell you that the department is an active participant in a multi-agency opioid task force that essentially pulls together the efforts in this to make this an all-administration effort, because we do recognize that it has so many factors. Even within DOJ, our Drug Enforcement Administration, our DEA, is dealing with this issue by what's called the 360 program. Enforcement, talking also with the manufacturers, at the corporate level, and the community education level as well. So recognizing that even for an enforcement agency, we have to have a multi-leveled approach. There is certainly, as I mentioned, this opioid task force that cuts across agencies, not just DOJ, but HHS. Veterans Affairs, heavily involved in this. Office of Narcotics and Drug, I'm going to forget the ONDCP, all their various names, but everyone focusing on this, HHS in particular, because this issue has to be dealt with at multiple levels. And so we found that that is the most effective way to deal with it. So I can assure you that not only is it viewed as an urgent issue, as an epidemic and a crisis, it's being viewed as a multi-agency one in how we have to resolve it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the President's request in the budget for over $1 billion, and I hope that Congress can provide the resources that are needed. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.